Capitol Hill. The president saying that the media would rather focus on immigration and all these other things. And yet, in your reporting yesterday, you specifically reported on the findings of the Inspector General. Why don't you take our viewers through that and what ultimately the results of that hearing were?
Yes, this morning I got up at 5 a.m. To report for CBS this morning on the Inspector General report. Last night I was here until about 8 p.m. Reporting out additional findings from the Inspector General report. And then we also managed to cover immigration yesterday as well. We can multitask. But the president is upset that the immigration debate is distracting from a larger controversy over an FBI agent named Peter Strzok. Now, Strzok worked on both the Clinton email investigation and also the Russia probe at the beginning of that investigation. And subsequently, he went on to work for special counsel Robert Mueller. Now, various investigations have uncovered anti-Trump text messages exchanged between Mr. Strzok and an FBI lawyer named Lisa Page, who also worked on these investigations. Now, many of these new text messages were uncovered in an Inspector General report. That's an internal watchdog. He works at the Justice Department, and he spent the last 1.5 to 2 years reviewing how the FBI handled its investigation into Clinton's use of a private server. And they published a 500-page report last Thursday, which I read and have reported on extensively. It reviews a lot of what we already knew, but one of the new developments is that the Inspector General has recommended Strzok, Page, and 3 other FBI officials for possible disciplinary proceedings because of these anti-Trump text messages. And there are concerns on the part of the Inspector General that there could have been bias that influenced some of their work at the FBI.
And what's going on with Peter Strzok now? He's being investigated?
That's right. He is currently the subject of disciplinary proceedings within the FBI. We've learned that he was escorted out of the FBI building on Friday. He is still technically employed. Now, he was kicked off the Mueller probe after these texts were uncovered. He was reassigned to the Human Resources Department. He is going to fight for his job. I interviewed his lawyer last night, and he said that Strzok will continue to fight to work at the FBI, where he's worked for 20 years, although most people think it's very unlikely that Mr. Strzok will be able to reclaim his job after this disciplinary investigation goes through. I mean, you have to realize that Republican leadership, even an independent watchdog, they're all accusing him of tainting 2 of the most politically significant investigations in U.S. history. But his lawyer said he wants to go before Congress, he wants to testify, he wants to tell his story, and he does not want Republicans painting him or his actions unfairly. So this is not the last we've heard of Mr. Strzok. We should hear from him before Congress in the next few weeks. But as of now, he is technically employed at the FBI, though he is fighting for that job.
So we should just point out, Paula, that we are receiving pool notes for our viewers who are not
I'm going to pick up my phone so I can read them.
Yeah, so you can read along with us. Pool notes are generally the pool of reporters that are monitoring what happens at the White House, and the reporters are all from various networks, and they're reporting what the president is saying. We'll get that tape playback at some point, and we'll play that for our viewers. But President Trump, according to the pool notes, saying to reporters and some members of Congress who were there, as well as some members of the cabinet, that the dilemma, this is quoting the president, the dilemma is if you're weak, the country is going to be overwhelmed with people. If you're strong, then you don't have any hearts. Perhaps I'd like to be strong. Senator Tom Cotton also spoke and suggested that that children, quote, can't be a get-out-of-jail-free card for immigrants. And it's just sort of, again, it just sort of highlights the distinction that is being made here, that people who would come to this country for a better life because they're trying to escape horrific conditions in their countries, that there are some people who would believe that they're using their children as some kind of a pawn or some kind of a card or a get-out-of-jail card free, when in reality the danger would be leaving your child if you were going to make your way to the land of the home of the free, that you would be leaving your children in a place where they were perhaps not as free as you could be here in the United States. But that is the note coming out of the White House, so we're expecting to get that tape playback very, very soon. Apparently in the room, the Vice President, Wilbur Ross, Commerce Secretary, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. Lawmakers include Senator Graham, Senator Alexander, Cornyn, Wicker, Thornberry. So there's a significant number of Republican lawmakers in. And
just sort of an added little nugget, according to some of our pool notes, he also announced that he's canceling the annual congressional picnic. The reason why, it just doesn't feel right. This is a quote. It doesn't feel right to have a picnic for Congress. And, you know, as we speculate as to what prompted this, right? Once again, it's AP reporting, but, you know, well, no, not anymore. We know he says he's going to sign something. As we speculate as to what prompted this, I wonder if some of the pushback on social media has had an impact. You know, his daughter Ivanka tweeted out some images for Father's Day of her children, and immediately there was an onslaught of pushback. I wonder if they're considering just, you know, as the kids say, it's not a good look to be out there picnicking while this is happening, while alongside children crying and being pulled away from their parents.
Agreed, and at the core of that is sort of congressional inaction, and that really is a lot of the Trump platform, right? Draining the swamp, getting rid of the gridlock that's not serving people. So absolutely, you don't even necessarily need the crisis at the border to know that a lot of people aren't going to be very impressed by seeing members of Congress eating tea sandwiches and drinking soda while they're not actually fulfilling their obligations and not actually passing anything to solve many of the problems the U.S. is facing. And today, of course, what's top of mind is immigration. So yes, as an optics matter, it does make sense perhaps to cancel that picnic.
Right, and let's face it, the fact is that many people in this country, ranging from Republicans to Democrats to religious leaders, were all coming out. Former first ladies were coming out against it, as Laura Bush did. Even the president's wife, Melania, the current first lady, tweeted something that seemed to indicate that she was not as supportive of
at least that she didn't like the idea of families being separated.
The idea of families being separated. So we've got some tape playback from earlier today where Democrats were talking about this on the Hill. Some of them got very passionate. I want to play that, and then Paula will talk about it.
And I said to all of the young people, to all of the children, we are getting in good trouble to set people free. We can do it. If we fail to do it, history will not be kind to us. This is going on too long, and it must stop, and it must stop now, not tomorrow, but now. Now is the time to do what is right, what is fair, and what is just.
Child abuse is a violation of human rights, and the world is watching.
I think this is not a zero tolerance policy. What it is a zero humanity policy. It has to stop, and it has to stop now.
I never thought that we would have a day where children are being used as just leverage, as pawns, as for ransom. It's not going to be tolerated. We got to stop that before the election, but we will always remember what happened here.
All right, so Democrats, very passionate. A short time after that, Paul Ryan spoke to reporters. I want to play a little bit of what he had to say in response to questions about this pending legislation that they're going to put forth.
This bill is Plan B, by the way, for us to begin with. So right now, we're focused on this legislation. By the way, it solves DACA in a very elegant way, I think. It's a very good solution for DACA. So right now, we're focused on getting this bill passed. The president came to our conference yesterday and asked members to support this bill. That is our focus. If other things happen, we'll cross those bridges when we get to it.
You know, the Democrats talked a bit about the problems with the legislation. We didn't play any of that, but, you know, the Republicans have been saying all along that the Democrats won't sign legislation. So this is the legislation that Paul Ryan is talking about. It's called the compromise bill, but Paula, it's actually not a compromise between Democrats and Republicans. It's a compromise between Republicans and more conservative, more hardline Republicans who really want to cut down not only on illegal immigration, but also legal immigration.
Exactly. I mean, that's really where the tension is the Democrats seem pretty united in their message on this, but within the Republican Party, there are sharp divides. There are more moderate Republicans who certainly don't want to see families separated. They want some sort of compromise or protections for so-called dreamers, but then they're standing side by side with immigration hardliners. Remember, this was a core tenet of the Trump campaign platform, was strict enforcement of our immigration laws, along with a wall, border security. I mean, there were a lot. This was a big part of why a lot of people supported the president. So while clearly we saw in that first clip there are a lot of people who are very emotional over this policy, there are also a lot of other people who believe it is an essential deterrent to send a message to the world that the U.S. means business when it comes to enforcing its immigration laws. It definitely puts Republicans, particularly those moderate Republicans, in a really difficult spot during an incredibly critical election year.
So, beyond the rhetoric that has been used by Democrats, by Republicans, by the President of the United States himself, many reasonable people, Paul, as you know, would agree that there needs to be a fix to immigration. And previous presidents have tried. President Obama tried. President Bush tried. And were not able to get the ball over the finish line, over the goal line. But if you step back and you look at some of the issues that have bubbled up over the last 18 months or so, they are a direct result of some of the actions the Trump administration has taken, including the issue with the Dreamers right now. If the president himself had not given Congress some kind of an artificial timetable to fix that issue, we wouldn't be where we are today with all these challenges. And again, if the president, through the attorney general, had not implemented the zero tolerance policy back in April, he wouldn't be facing what some would argue is probably right now, at least. And again, it seems that there's always something every week, but this is probably the most significant political crisis of his presidency.
Yeah, but Vlad and Paula, this is sort of part of the president's tactics, right? I mean, when it came to DACA, he deliberately ended the DACA protections in the hopes, according to him, of forcing Congress to hammer out some sort of comprehensive immigration policy or immigration law. It never happened. The deadline came and went. And what you see with this compromise bill, and you heard Paul Ryan really highlight the DACA component of it, because that's what prompted all these discussions, this DACA protection ending. Unfortunately for him, in the meanwhile, another very pressing issue bubbled to the surface. It seems to be part of the president's tactics to sort of create a crisis, to encourage Congress to act. But on immigration, it's not working.
That could be part of it, but we also have to look at what's happening in the border. One of the most significant achievements of the president's first year was the fact that illegal border crossings were down double digits, and that held for quite some time. But over the past few months, there have been increases. Again, nothing like what we've seen over the past few years, but there was an uptick, and that was a signal to Chief of Staff John Kelly and Attorney General Jeff Sessions that this would be a good time to implement a policy that they had been considering for well over a year, which is a zero tolerance policy and using separating families as a deterrent. The Chief of Staff, he is on the record saying this is a deterrent, as is the Attorney General. Other people want to deflect that. The architects of this policy have consistently said they believe that this would be a deterrent. So in many ways, they've wanted to do this for quite some time, and the fact that illegal border crossings were increasing gave them an opportunity to do that. However, it is the president and maybe perhaps some representatives in Congress who will bear the ultimate political price of those pictures and the audio and all the things that we've been seeing coming up from the border. And in talking with the president over the past week, he did that gaggle on Friday. He came down and talked to us. He didn't seem especially read in on the various legislative proposals. It didn't really seem that this issue was top of mind for him. He said he didn't really like separating families, but he seemed squarely focused on North Korea and the economy and his accomplishments in those realms. This did not seem to be something that he was especially focused on, and perhaps that is part of why he didn't realize how much political blowback there would be when this was actually implemented and people started seeing pictures and hearing the stories of the little children separated from their parents.
Well, the president did tweet today that, people aren't talking about North Korea as much as he probably expected that they would be, something his son Don Jr. also tweeted. Again, Paula, as you're reading along with us here on your phone, you have seen the pool notes, the most recent pool note number 6, the president taking questions and confirming that he will sign an executive order, going on to say that the images that have been flashing across television screens here and around the world affect everyone, of course. Went back to the well and blamed the Obama administration, saying you have double standards. This has been going on for 50 years. Paula, you will know, as well as some of our viewers, that President Obama did face increased spikes in illegal immigration during his terms in office. And there was that nickname that was floated for many, many years, deporter-in-chief. President Obama deported more illegal immigrants out of the United States than any other president previous before him. But here the president, of course, saying that this problem all began before he became president of the United States, which is absolutely true. Absolutely true. The question, of course, is even as President Obama deported illegal immigrants, he didn't separate children, toddlers, young kids from their parents.
Well, there were aspects of that policy actually that did have to be carried out after the Flores decision in the, I believe, I can't remember which circuit it was, I think it was the Ninth Circuit. After that decision came down, the Obama administration was beholden to that, but one way to get around that is to not criminally prosecute people who come across the border illegally. You handle it as a civil matter, and if you're handling things as a civil matter, you're not incarcerated when you commit a civil infraction. And that's really the difference between the zero tolerance policy that Sessions enacted and what was going on during the final days of the Obama administration, is they have decided now to criminally prosecute people. Kids can't go to jail. They can't be incarcerated for crimes. That's why families need to be separated. So that's really a key distinction between how the Obama administration handled the laws on the books and how the Sessions Justice Department has decided to proceed.
Paula, just stand by because we're about 40 seconds or so away from that tape playback of the President of the United States talking to reporters with some members of Congress there with him. So that will roll out. We'll watch what the President has to say, and then we'll come back and talk about what action potentially he may be taking to end what many people have been seeing flashing across your screens over the last couple of days, and for really lack of a better word, has disturbed people in significant ways. So we're expecting that tape playback to roll out very, very soon. You bring up a good point, and there we go, Paula. So let's go and watch the President.
Well, thank you very much, everybody. I'll be leaving for Minnesota today. We have 2 stops, one a very big one, and it'll be a lot of fun. I know a lot of you are going with us, so that'll be interesting. We're meeting right now on immigration, and we are very strong at the border. We're very strong on security. We want security for our country. The Republicans want security and insist on security for our country, and we will have that. At the same time, we have compassion. We want to keep families together. It's very important. I'll be signing something in a little while that's going to do that, and the people in this room want to do that, and they're working on various pieces of legislation to get it done. But I'll be doing something that's somewhat preemptive, but ultimately will be matched by legislation, I'm sure. We're having a lot of problems with Democrats. They don't want to vote for anything. They don't care about lack of security. They really would like to have open borders where anybody in the world can just flow in, including from the Middle East, from anybody, anywhere. They can just flow into our country. Tremendous problems with that, tremendous crime caused by that. We're just not going to do it. I do want to say that because we're all so busy, and I just mentioned to the congressmen and the senators in the room that we are going to cancel and postpone tomorrow's congressional picnic. We have a congressional picnic tomorrow, and I was just walking over to the Oval Office and I said, it doesn't feel right to have a picnic for Congress when we're working on doing something very important. We have many things that are important. We're talking about trade, we're talking about many, many things, but it didn't feel exactly right to me. So we will be officially postponing the congressional picnic for tomorrow. We'll make it another time when things are going extremely well. And they are going for the country extremely well. We have record-setting numbers in every way economically, but we want to solve this immigration problem, which is going on for 40 years more. It's been going on forever. And we want to see if we can solve it. So we are canceling or postponing the congressional picnic tomorrow. Would anybody in the room have any question or statement that you'd like to make while the press is here? Anybody? Anybody?
I'll say one, Mr. President.
Yes.
On the issue of immigration, trade, and investment, these are all areas where Congress has a lot of authority under the Constitution, and you have authority. The executive branch has authority under the Constitution. I think that's why meetings like this are really important, bringing the leadership on both sides together because they're important issues. So appreciate the opportunity to let you see our views, hear our views on these issues where we share authority on important matters. Thank you.
Well, we all very much have the same views. We want to keep family together. At the same time, we have to be strong on the border. Otherwise, you'll have millions of people coming up, not thousands like we have now. You'll have millions of people flowing up and just overtaking the country. We're not letting that happen. So we have to be very strong on the border. But at the same time, we want to be very compassionate. Yes, Lamar.
Mr. President, thanks for having us. I think what Dan said was good. We really have, on the issues on trade, on immigration, we have a partnership under the Constitution. We have some authority. The President has some authority. We need to work together. I was thinking this morning when we look at President Nixon's portrait in the White House, we think that he did the unexpected and he went to China, because he could do that. He was in a position to do it. And President Reagan did the unexpected. He went to the Berlin Wall in Moscow. And when we were here a year ago, I think I suggested to you that immigration, which has bedeviled us for 40 years, as you've said, I believe you're the president who can help us solve the immigration problem with your leadership. You may be able to do for immigration what Nixon did for China and Reagan did for the Soviet Union. And a lot of us would like to work with you on that.
Yeah, thank you, Lamar, very much. We need the Democrats' support because we need their votes. It's very simple. You know, people say we have a majority. Well, we have a one majority in the Senate. We need 60. Unfortunately, we don't go with the majority. We go with 60. Someday somebody will explain why, but that's the way it is. We need 60 votes. We have 51 votes at the most. So we need Democrat votes in order to do it. Otherwise, you can't do it. Tom, you were going to say something? Tom?
Well, I think it's very important that we protect our border. We cannot allow a child to be a get-out-of-jail-free card and a get-into-the-U.S. free ticket. But at the same time, as you said, as we've all said, we'd like to keep families together, keep them together at the border for the orderly and timely processing of the adult's immigration claim. If it's a lawful, legitimate claim, we can admit the family into the country. If not, they'll have to go back to their home country. I'm glad you're looking for a solution for that. I know that we in Congress are working on legislation that will allow our hardworking Border Patrol agents to keep families together at the border while we process their claims in a timely fashion.
You're right. And you bring up something that I have to say. Our Border Patrol agents and our ICE agents have done one great job. ICE is we're throwing by the thousands MS-13. They come into the country. We're liberating towns on Long Island and other places. We're throwing them out by the thousands, but we need laws that don't allow them to come back in. Mac, you've been very involved in this issue. Do you have anything to say?
Well, Mr. President, there are a number of issues that we're going to be able to discuss today that touch on our country's national security. And certainly controlling who and what comes across our border is an element of national security, as we do the compassionate thing with families. And I look forward to working with you to further strengthen our military. Together, we have turned around a declining situation, but that's also part of what we need to do together. Back to Lamar's point about we both have responsibilities, we can do more together.
I will say, with all of the numbers that you see, if we weren't strong on the border, you'd have hundreds of thousands of people pouring through the border. They'd just be pouring through, and the country would not be the country anymore. Lindsay?
We got a big, massive mess that's been going on for decades, and we're all going to fix it one day, I hope. But we've got a specific problem that puts the country in a dilemma. Here's your dilemma, it's President Obama's dilemma, our dilemma. If a family shows up at the border and we let the family go into the country and say, please come back for your hearing, about 80% of the time, the adults never show up for the hearing. I think most Americans feel like that is bad. It will create a third wave of illegal immigration. I want to be fair to the people who came here under the old system, but I don't want to create incentives to create a third wave. The other choice is if you detain the parents who broke the law under the Flores decision, you have to break the family up. So there's a 1997 Supreme Court case that we got to deal with. So I would urge my Democratic friends to see if we can find a way to keep families together, have a legislative fix to the Flores decision, and argue about the other things later. Because right now, Mr. President, you're in a real bind. If you detain the adults, the law requires the children to be separated. If you let the adults into the country, they never show up. Seems to me that we want to keep the family together and have the parents show up for their day in court. To Senator Schumer, I know there's a lot we don't agree on, but surely to goodness we can fix this court decision because the country's in a bad spot, not just you.
Well, Lindsay, the dilemma is that if you're weak, which some people would like you to be, if you're really, really pathetically weak, the country's going to be overrun with millions of people. And if you're strong, then you don't have any heart. That's a tough dilemma. Perhaps I'd rather be strong, but that's a tough dilemma. Yes, go ahead, Ron.
In our committee, Homeland Security, we've held 30 hearings on border security, and you know how much I like data. And Senator Graham mentioned the fact that we have these incentives. There's nothing compassionate, by the way, of enticing people to take a very dangerous journey on a train they call the Beast, or through the desert. We've seen pictures of dead, desiccated bodies in the desert. There's nothing compassionate about that. But here's what's happened since 2012, since DACA. Just talk about unaccompanied children. Prior to that, somewhere between 3,000 or 4,000 unaccompanied children from Central America came into this country. Then DACA was instituted in 2012, and that problem skyrocketed. The numbers on it, about 225,000 unaccompanied children just from Central America, about almost 500,000 family members. So we've got another 750,000 individuals, very sympathetic, that we're just incentivizing for coming, and we have to stop. We have to stop those incentives. Our goal of our policy should be to reduce the flow of people incentivized to come to this country, and that's what strong enforcement actually does.
So just so everybody knows, this deal was just about done. We had a deal signed. President Obama signed DACA. When he signed it, he said, I'm really not allowed to sign this, and I'm going to sign it anyway. But he actually said, I'm not allowed to sign this, never going to hold up. And they got a judge who held it up, and they got another one who held it up. Then we had a couple that turned it down, and it's going to be a Supreme Court issue. But before it was held up, everyone assumed that the DACA would not be held up, and we had a deal with the Democrats. It was a deal that everybody agreed to. It was $25 billion. We were going to build a wall. We would take care of many, many different things, including loopholes. It was all done, except when this judge ruled in favor of DACA, meaning that it could continue until we get to the Supreme Court, all of a sudden they weren't there anymore. And that's what happened, and that's why we're in this mess, because we had a couple of court decisions which is going to force an issue to the Supreme Court that shouldn't be forced to the Supreme Court. Yes, John?
Thanks for inviting us up on these important issues and for having this important discussion, certainly on immigration, but also on trade. And the context that I want to make sure we talk about is we've made incredible progress on tax relief. We've made tremendous progress on regulatory relief, and it's reflected in our economy. Now, if we can do the same thing on trade, think what that means for our country in terms of economic growth, in terms of jobs, in terms of getting wages moving higher, and the impact that has for all Americans. So we have to look at it in that context. When we talk about trade, it's on top of tax relief, regulatory relief, and now if we can get the right policies in place on trade, think what that means for our country.
Well, we're doing very well on trade, I will say. We've been really hurt as a country on trade for many years. Despite bad trade deals, we're doing very well. Now we're making very good trade deals. Well, you'll be seeing that. They'll be announced pretty rapidly. We already have a couple that are made, but we're making great trade deals. And honestly, we need people coming into our country. You know, we have a lot of companies coming into our country. Chrysler just announced. We have Foxconn is going up to Wisconsin, as you know, and a great company. They make the Apple iPhones and laptops, and an unbelievable company. We need people. We need people that work for these companies because they're coming in at a number that nobody ever thought possible. So we want people to come into our country, but I think I can speak for everybody at the table. We want them to come in based on merit. We want great people that will be great for our country. And we want them to come in based on merit. We're going to need those people because we have so many companies coming to the country. John, you're going to say something?
Mr. President, to your point, America is the most generous country in the world when it comes to legal immigration. And I think we ought to draw a very clear line between legal immigration that benefits our country,
right, absolutely,
and illegal immigration, which is a threat to public safety. I just wanted to make the one point. I agree with what Tom Cotton and others have said, what you've said about being able to enforce the law and keep families together. It's not a mutually exclusive choice. We can do both, and I'm confident we will achieve that goal. But I just want to point out that coming from a border state like Mac and I do, the border, the illegality along the border is a complex problem because it is, as somebody pointed out, it's commodity agnostic. In other words, they said it's people, it's drugs, it's weapons, and you talk about an opioid crisis in the United States, it's not just prescription drugs, it's heroin that comes from Mexico. Right. So this is a very complex situation. We need law and order along the border. Everybody agrees with that. We need to be compassionate the way we handle these families. But it's important to remember that larger context, because the cartels and the criminal organizations that benefit from this, they're just making a lot of money and keeping this situation very dangerous for everybody involved.
And John, in many ways, they're using the children, in all ways. They're using the children as a ticket to getting into the country, and we have to remember that. You know, there's a number of the 12,000 children, 2,000 are with the parents, and 10,000 came up with some really horrible people in some cases. You have the coyotes, you have the traffickers, the human traffickers. Not only drug traffickers, but you have the human traffickers, and they use these children as passports to get into the country. So we have to work on that too. It's a very complex issue. It has been going on. You shouldn't feel guilty, because it's been going on for many, many years, many, many decades. But we're going to solve that along with a lot of other problems that we've already solved. We're doing well at solving problems. You know, when I became president, we had North Korea, we had the Iran deal, which was no good. We had lots of problems with trade and bad trade deals. There are a lot of things that we solved and we're solving that, in theory, I shouldn't have had to solve. These are things that should have been solved for a long time. Even on trade. We should have never allowed, our past leaders should have never allowed China to get to a point where there's a $500 billion trade deficit with the United States. When they went up, we should have gone up. We should have gone up together. Not where you allowed one to get so far ahead. And that includes the European Union, and it includes many others. Shouldn't have happened. So we came at a time where there were plenty of problems to solve. And one of the big problems is immigration. And I hope that within not too long, you know, a distance, and I mean beyond this one problem of immigration. You can mention the word comprehensive, or you don't have to use it. A lot of politicians don't like the word comprehensive immigration reform, but I really think we have an opportunity to do the whole immigration picture, and that's what I'm looking to do ultimately. But right now we want to fix this problem, and I think we'll be able to do that. Does anybody else, David, you want to say something?
Well, Mr. President, you know, the last year and a half has shown an absolute turnaround in this economy. I mean, we were faced with 8 years of 1.9% economic growth. We focused on, as John said, regulation, energy, taxes. This year we put a Dodd-Frank bill, a bipartisan bill, that will free up a couple $1 trillion. So what this administration has done is freed up $6 trillion to go back in the economy. This is real jobs, 3.5 million new jobs, 870 regulations reversed. This economy is moving. The rest of the world's paying attention. NATO has doubled their investment in terms of their military spending. We have a new free trade agreement with Korea. We're heading in the right direction. I just hope that we can focus on the priorities right now within this trade equation to get equal access. It's not right when Alibaba can do cloud computing in the U.S. and Google can't do cloud computing in China. And that's what this is all about. We've reduced global poverty by 2/3 in the last 40 years, while poverty in the United States has remained flat. That's not right, and this is moving to change that.
Yes. Jim?
I appreciate the fact that you call attention to what's really happening now with the economy due to two things: the tax bill and the regulation. You know, we're killing people with the regulations, but what hasn't been said around this table, and I'm surprised, the biggest accomplishment from your administration is what you've done with the military. You know, you succeeded a president who had a policy that said you can't do anything with sequestration with the military unless you do it with the non-defense. And we changed it. We had to vote for a lousy budget bill to do it, but nonetheless, it is changed. We've broken parity, and we're now rebuilding our military.
Sure. Well, military is really incredible. We're ordering new planes, new ships, all jobs too. You know, jobs, I would say in this case is a far second. But we're going to have a military like we've never had before, and it's great. $700 billion approved and $716, and in that budget, $6 billion for opioid. That's an important thing too. So a lot of progress is being made. Mike, did you have something to say? Mike Pence?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. And I know I speak for the President when I express the gratitude of this administration for the support of the members of the Senate and the House that are gathered around here. You've delivered for the American people on national security, rebuilding our military, on tax cuts and regulatory reform, restoring our economy. But what the President reiterated again yesterday, and he has said every day from when he sought this office, is we have a crisis of illegal immigration. And as the President made clear, we don't want families to be separated. We don't want children taken away from parents. But right now, under the law, and we sit with these lawmakers, we only have two choices before us. Number one is don't prosecute people who come into our country illegally, or prosecute them, and then under court cases and the law, they have to be separated from their children. What I want to be clear about is we're calling on these lawmakers, Mr. President, not just to solve this problem in a way that affirms our commitment to law and order and compassion, which we can do. And there are proposals in the Senate, proposals in the House to do that. But the President's vision, articulated in his State of the Union address, was let's solve the whole problem. Let's build a wall, let's close the loopholes, let's solve the problem for 1.8 million people that were brought into this country through no fault of their home, and let's deal with law and order and compassion with this issue of family separation at our borders. And I would say, with great respect to the members of Congress, as the House considers legislation tomorrow, the Senate's considering legislation, the President has postponed the congressional picnic. We're calling on Congress to act. Let's roll our sleeves up. Let's work the whole problem. Let's end this crisis of illegal immigration.
Thank you very much. Does anybody else have anything to say? Because I think we're pretty much on. Yes.
Mr. President, thank you. And just from the House perspective, I want to say, Anna is a still currently serving Guard member. You're my Commander-in-Chief. There has been a marked difference in the security and the good feelings in the military. They understand that we're investing in them again, even though we're asking them to do a lot. And secondly, security plays a big role. So that includes border security, and the bill that we're going to bring up and hopefully pass in the House this week fully funds the border and takes care of all these issues. And I hope the House can pass it. And I wish Democrats would join us, because frankly, it's a lot of stuff in there that they like too. It's an 80% issue. Unfortunately, I think they like the politics of this a little better. And I also want to say, we really wish you didn't take Secretary Pompeo from the House, because he did a great job. He's doing a great job.
He's doing a great job. He is doing a great job. Thank you, Adam, very much. Appreciate it. Anybody over here? Yes.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to echo particularly what Chairman Thornberry and Senator Inhofe said in terms of the change that we've seen, and Adam as well, the change we've seen in terms of resources for the military. We got to make sure we don't have another CR for the military, though. Right. And we are working hard in the House. We're hopeful we're going to pass a defense appropriations bill next week in the House. And we need to make sure that that gets taken up and passed in the Senate, and then we don't give you another omnibus type bill. But we get a straight defense appropriations bill passed and taken up, and that'll be critically important to continue the work you've done to rebuild the military.
Thank you, Liz. And say hello to your father, please. Great guy.
You need to tell Adam to shave.
He looks good. Handsome guy. So thank you all very much. We appreciate it. We are. We're looking to keep families together. It's very important. We're going to be signing an executive order. We're going to also count on Congress, obviously, but we are signing an executive order in a little while. We're going to keep families together, but we still have to maintain toughness, or our country will be overrun by people, by crime, by all of the things that we don't stand for and that we don't want. So I'm going to be signing an executive order in a little while before I go to Minnesota. But at the same time, I think you have to understand we're keeping families together, but we have to keep our borders strong. We will be overrun with crime and with people that should not be in our country.
Will you accept a standalone bill addressing the family separation issue?
We're going to see what happens.
Mr. President, do the images of those young children at the border?
Yes, they affect everybody. Those images affect everybody. But I have to say that you have double standards. You have people that want absolute security and safety, and you have people that do look at the children, and then you have people like me, and I think most of the people in this room, that want both. We want the heart, but we also want strong borders, and we want no crime. We don't want crime in this country. We don't want people coming in. We don't want people coming in from the Middle East through our border, using children to get through the lines. We don't want that. We're doing too good a job to allow that to happen. So we're not going to allow that to happen. Thank you very much. Nothing. This has been going on for, when you say what took long, this has been going on for 50 years, longer. This has been going on under President Obama, under President Bush. This has been going on for many, many years. We're going to see if we can solve it. This is not something that happened just now. You look at the images from 2014. I was watching this morning, and they were showing images from 2014. They blow away what we're looking at today. And that was not during this, that was during the Obama administration. I saw images that were horrible. And you know the ones I'm talking about, because I'm sure you all saw them too. We're going to see if we can solve the immigration problem like we've solved so many other problems. And I think we'll get it done. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you all very much.
All right, there you have the president saying that he will be signing an executive order that will address the issue of security at the border as well as the separation of families at the border. I want to go straight to Major Garrett at the White House. Major, you know, for days now, the president has been saying, you know, it's up to the Democrats to do something if you want to stop the separation of the border. Doesn't look like it because he's about to sign an executive order. What do we make of this?
No, the word from the Attorney General earlier this week, from the Homeland Security Secretary, the President himself, and those who speak on behalf of the White House, President's hands are tied. The law is the law. You got to enforce the law. We have no choice. Our options are limited. Well, no, they're not limited, actually. You can find a way to solve this because, in fact, and this is an undisputed fact, this administration decided, with its zero-tolerance policy, to prosecute everyone interdicted at the border, knowing that there was a 1997 Supreme Court decision in the Flores case that required parents to be separated from their children or adults to be separated from those children accompanying them, whether they were their children or not. Other administrations have faced this similar dilemma, and in certain respects, the Obama and Bush administrations before the Trump administration, on a limited basis, separated families. But when this administration asserted and enforced a zero-tolerance policy, it set this situation, playing out on the southern border right now, in motion. That has become a political crisis for Republicans in the House and Senate. It has become an optics crisis for this White House, forcing the president, for the very first time in his presidency, to reverse himself on an issue in which he has been both entrenched and resolute: border security. Is it a huge reversal? No, but it is worth noting that even in this administration and with this president who has been so aggressive on immigration, even these politics were too much for him to bear without changing his approach. And the changed approach is, by his executive order, he will keep families together. And that is something he will do temporarily, awaiting action from Congress. And he indicated at the very tail end of that question and answer session that he might sign a piece of legislation that only addresses this issue, not all the other immigration priorities established by this administration. That's what to watch. If Republicans and Democrats get together on this family separation issue and put a singular, narrow piece of legislation on the president's desk, will he sign it? And will he sign it knowing that in so doing, he will probably not be able to accomplish anything else on immigration the remainder of this legislative year? That's the next question for this White House.
Major, stand by. I want to bring in Paula Reed, our Washington correspondent, who's in our bureau in D.C. Paula, what are you hearing from your sources at Justice and at Homeland Security?
Well, I'm told since about 7 o'clock this morning, justice officials, including the Attorney General Jeff Sessions, have been huddled at the Justice Department working on this executive order. And I'm told this executive order will certainly not end the policy of zero tolerance, so they will still aim to prosecute everyone who crosses the border illegally. But during the process of deportation and prosecution, this executive order will allow families to be held together. Now, they are anticipating some legal challenges to this executive order under the Flores case that Major mentioned a short time ago, but they are confident that the president's expansive executive power will prevail, especially since we are talking about the welfare and the safety of children at the border. So they've been working on this all day. And even though Attorney General Sessions is the one who implemented the zero tolerance policy and has been almost the only member of the administration to be consistent in his ownership of that and his commitment to it and the fact that it is a deterrent, he was actually one of the architects of this executive order today.
So, Paula, just to clarify, when you talk about the Flores decision, which a lot of people don't know about, you know, because they are arresting people at the border, That is why the children have been separated from their parents. And the Flores decision indicates that you can't hold children for more than 20 days. It seems like this is going to be difficult for the administration to get around.
Well, not necessarily, because you can handle immigration two ways. You can handle it as a civil matter, or you can prosecute everyone who comes across the border illegally. And before the zero tolerance policy, the Department of Homeland Security and the Justice Department had discretion. If they encountered someone who they believed was a criminal or part of some sort of criminal organization, they could opt to prosecute that person or not. Or they could release those people into the community and give them a court date, which statistically many people never showed up for. So here the Attorney General said, look, we're going to prosecute every single person who crosses the border illegally. Now, in order to prosecute someone, you must arrest them, you detain them, and because children cannot be incarcerated for crimes, that is part of why many families had to be separated, which led to this crisis. Now, an executive order seems to be really, outside of legislation, the only legal and politically viable solution to the situation that they found themselves in. Of course, they could reverse course on zero tolerance, but I'm told that the Justice Department, they're absolutely not going to do that, which leaves them with an executive order workaround. We'll see how it works out in the field and in the courts.
All right, Major Garrett is standing by still. Major,
something that's really important based on what Paula just said and what the president's remarks said throughout that 25-minute session with House and Senate Republicans. Repeatedly, he referred to people coming across the border as criminals, smugglers. This policy assumes and asserts on behalf of the federal government that because you're crossing the border without documentation, you are probably a criminal. Not just someone who's crossing the border to obtain employment or for some other reason that is and was viewed by previous administrations as largely benign. So if everyone is a criminal, then everyone must be prosecuted. And that is what's new. The assumption carried out by the government that if you're at the border without documentation, you must be a criminal of some kind, a drug smuggler, a human trafficker, something really bad. And the president's language continues to conflate and use symbolic adjectives to describe those who come to the border without documentation as universally carrying criminal intent. That assumption lies behind this new zero tolerance policy. You can change that assumption. You can use the assumption previous administrations did, which had looked for evidence of criminal trafficking of either drugs or human beings or something other nefarious. And then, if they couldn't find it, would essentially treat people who were trying to cross the border without documentation as something akin to a traffic violation. Give them a citation, ask them to come back and have a processing court date. But it's this administration that made the decision to assume and then assert on behalf of the law, everyone crossing must be a criminal and therefore must be prosecuted. That's when the Flores decision came into play. So yes, this administration found itself in this situation. This administration also put itself in this situation.
Major, that's the point that I want to drill down in because, as you know, being a digital network, we get a lot of digital feedback in real time from people on social media. The president, using the language that you talked about, in the comments he just made there at the White House, he again pointed out people coming from the Middle East. He didn't say terrorists, he just said people coming from the Middle East. The language that the president used in a tweet yesterday, he used the word, no matter how bad they may be, to pour into and infest our country like MS-13. A lot of people have said, including the president, many of these policies began under President Obama. If you recall, Major, you covered the Obama presidency. They used to call Barack Obama the deporter-in-chief. I just want you to highlight for our viewers and explain to our viewers the point you were sort of making there again, but even with more clarity, if possible, that Barack Obama and the policies that the Obama administration implemented during his administration are vastly different than this zero-tolerance policy that the President of the United States has implemented with this no zero-tolerance policy. Just break that down one last time for our viewers.
Sure, and I can't give everyone minute chapter and verse on this because I can only work off my imperfect memory. But President Obama dealt with crises on the border. He sent National Guard there. He also said a message that in the limited cases in which families were separated from those children traveling with them, don't come to the border. So the president, meaning President Obama, said some of the same words that President Trump has said in this context. President George W. Bush also had to deal with this issue because there are seasonal surges at the border of illegal crossers, those without documentation. This is not the first president who's had to deal with this issue. And what's important in this context to think about with President Trump is last spring, when we were having this conversation about immigration, this White House was trumpeting the fact that illegal border crossings were way down. Now, this year, they've seen an increase. Not an increase of historical size, meaning so much larger than we've ever seen before, but large in relation to the decrease last year. That created a sense of political panic within this White House. Why? Because its hardcore base that wanted strong border security was getting restive about the fact that the president hadn't secured money for the border wall and was beginning to wonder if this president was getting weak on immigration. So in April, this administration made the zero tolerance policy announcement. And it had to know. And if it didn't know, it was an act of political and procedural malpractice not to know that this would be the inevitable result, separating families, meaning parents from their children, and adults from their accompanied minors traveling with them. Now, there are issues involved, as Paula has identified. There are loopholes. There are ways in which people who seek asylum or smugglers say the right words. They've learned the catchphrases and have found a way to sort of skirt the system. That's not untrue. There are aspects of this that Republicans and Democrats who are really versed on this issue understand and would like to solve. The problem is, once you introduce one immigration issue on Capitol Hill, all the other issues therefore follow. And it's been the inability to achieve bipartisan consensus on any more than one issue that has kept this issue stalled. If the president will solve this one issue, then he can. But that's going to be a choice he'll have to make in the next couple of days.
All right, Major, Paula, stand by. I want to bring in CBS News Chief Congressional Correspondent Nancy Cordes. She's been getting reaction from the Hill. Nancy, what are you hearing?
Well, you know, for days we've been talking to Republicans and Democrats who say that the president can change this situation with the stroke of the pen. Well, now that we're hearing about this executive order, we are talking about the stroke of a pen, but perhaps not the kind of executive order that members of Congress were referring to, because as Senator Rubio of Florida, Republican,